Okay, guys, so now we're going to start the diencephalon. So let's look at a couple of pictures of it. I don't know if I have a really good one or not, but we'll start with this one. Okay, so you might want to mark this on your PowerPoint. This right here is the thalamus. This area right here that is a little bit inferior and more anterior is the hypothalamus. And the pineal gland is right back here, okay? It's right here in this area. It also has things that we're not going to talk about. It does control the pituitary gland that sits right here. Remember, this is the stella turcical of the skull. The pituitary gland sits right there. This right here is called the infundibulum, and that is the stalk of the pituitary gland. This right here is the corpus callosum, which kind of forms the roof of the diencephalon. And then the way to think about the diencephalon itself and how it's made is if you took a hard-boiled egg that doesn't have much white and a lot of yolk, and you cut it in half. Okay, so now you've got your mid-sagittal section cutting in half. You take out the yolk, and that's where the third ventricle is. And then the white that you have left is actually the diencephalon. So when I cut it mid-sagittally, I'm actually cutting into that third ventricle. And then the walls of it, or the white, is what the diencephalon is. So if you look right here, let's go to the next picture. Again, thalamus here, hypothalamus. Sorry. Let's see what else I have here. Don't know if I have any of. Oh, wait a minute. Oh. Wouldn't you know it? It was the last one. Okay. So, I'm working on all thrusters now, aren't I? Okay. This is the diencephalon, and it has the things labeled in it right here. Remember, this tells you everything function-wise. Do not get hung up in the cranial nerves. I'm not going to ask you those things. Okay. So we have here that the thalamus, and what it does is it's two paired nuclei. Those are those little bumps you see in there. And they relay sensory information up to the cerebral cortex to be processed. And they send things down to the motor neurons, what the decisions are made. It also plays a role in the RAS system, but the midbrain plays a bigger role. But the thalamus also helps decide what is important and what's not. Like I said, it helps take things down to the motor function, so it transmits the commands from the cerebral cortex all the way down to the cerebellum and back. It decides what all sections of the cerebrum needs to receive the message coming up, and it helps regulate autonomic activities. The diencephalon is huge in autonomic activities. The thalamus is controlling what goes up to the cerebrum and what comes down from the cerebrum, but the hypothalamus is like the king of autonomic activities. Remember, that means automatic. So it's slightly below or inferior to the thalamus, but it's above the pituitary gland, which remember I pointed out in the other picture right there. It's in the stella turcical, sorry, right there. But this is what maintains homeostasis. If something's wrong with your hypothalamus, then you're in trouble. So it has control of the autonomic nervous system. It regulates the heart and the glands that control the heart. So it's heart rate. The other glands, like that are big in the stomach and the urine in the bladder, so it controls how we process food and how we process our waste, how we decide what to keep as far as chemicals go, and what we decide to get rid of. It does control the pituitary gland because it's directly connected to it, and that's what controls growth factors and things like that, and also the sexual maturity as far as developing secondary sexual organs. Regulation of emotional and behavioral patterns are connected to this, but it's also connected to the limbic system as a whole. Limbic system is what makes us have memories tied into emotions, and sort of it works in a loop. We're going to talk about that later on. But it helps regulate feelings, even sexual arousal. The regulation of eating and drinking. If we're thirsty, it detects an increase of osmotic pressure. Remember, osmotic pressure has to do with the amount of solute that is in solution. So whenever we detect that our osmotic pressure is increasing, we get thirsty. It also has a satiety center. In other words, when I feel satisfied when I eat, that is controlled by the hypothalamus. It is huge in controlling body temperature. We talked about that again whenever we were doing the first chapter. It detects temperature. So if we're too hot, it makes us sweat. If we're too cold, it turns on like our rector pili and we shiver. We've talked all about that, but it helps. That decides what we're going to do, detecting detecting temperature of the blood flow. Also, it regulates our circadian rhythms and states of consciousness. In other words, when we're awake and when we're asleep. Um, Everybody has different circadian rhythms, and we sort of push them back and forth. They're controlled a lot by light and melatonin also. So that's huge. And we're going to find out that the pineal gland, which we'll go ahead and talk about that right now, has a lot to do with our periods of awake and sleep. It's very small. It's back here. Let's just take another look at the picture real quick. Oh, it's back here. Remember, this is posterior. It's right back here. Let's go backwards. Sorry. And think it's right here. That's where the pineal gland is, in the very back of the diencephalion, okay, inferior part. But it actually secretes melatonin. Now, y'all probably all heard about melatonin because a lot of people take melatonin supplements to promote sleepiness. And it sort of sets our biological clock. It's interesting to note that melatonin secretion is disturbed by blue lights that are put out by certain devices. So now certain devices have lighting that you can take off the blue light, and it's a more yellow light, and it's not supposed to disturb your sleep as bad if you use it right before you go to bed. The rule of thumb is to stop all devices that have the blue light at least an hour before you go to sleep. So that's everything in the diencephalon, and what we're going to talk about next is the cerebellum. Y'all have a great day. Got to figure out how to turn it off.